This whole concept of men competing against women in women's sports is absurd. It's ridiculous. It's laughable.
This is Matt Walsh. If you're unfamiliar, he is part of the Daily Wire. So the Daily Wire, run by Ben Shapiro, produced this movie called Lady Ballers. And I happened across a hilarious little clip from Ben Shapiro that I don't know if he wanted anybody to see or not. I don't know why he would say such a thing as he said in this clip. So he's sitting here talking to his CEO of the company, I think, Jeremy Boring, about producing the film Lady Ballers. Let's just watch like a little trailer to Lady Ballers so you have an idea of what it is. I'm sure I don't even need to say this. It's an anti-trans movie, of course.
Let's cut to the chase. I know you're not a woman.
Hey, you know how he identifies.
If you can beat them.
What do you know about the U.S. Opens for the Global Games?
You want us to compete as women. $5,000 prizes.
My lover says you were a great coach back in the day.
Join.
This is the way the world is now. My 8-year-old daughter told me all about it. So a guy can become a girl with no physical changes at all.
That's called gender fluid.
So anyway, that's like a little jump into the trailer. I really hope I don't get a copyright hit for that. Anyways, that's what it's about. You getting the idea, right? It's an anti-trans, nonsensical movie that's supposed to be a comedy that also represents reality when it absolutely doesn't. I say it doesn't represent reality, but I'm not the only one that feels that way, as it turns out. Listen to Ben Shapiro talking to his guy here, Jeremy Boring. This clip, by the way, is from early December 2023.
You approached me and you said we should make a fictional film about this topic. Now, to be fair, I think I'd actually suggested to the Crane Boys that they do this as a doc.
Yes.
I originally went to them and I said, you guys should go try out for a bunch of ladies' leagues.
So they were going to do a documentary about trying out for women's sports and playing in them. Okay, go on. How did that go for you, Ben?
That became not possible because, as it turns out, most ladies' leagues don't allow in actual men.
You don't say. Really? Are you trying to tell me that you are starting this gigantic culture war over absolutely nothing? Huh. Color me surprised. Knock me over with a feather. It's completely made up outrage? How about that? Who saw that one coming?
Men, and they weren't willing to go the full distance in terms of what it would require in order to, the actual hormone treatments and everything.
Really? It's difficult to do, is what you're telling me. Somebody can't just identify as trans and suddenly like that are included in sports, you say. Interesting. This dude is a joke. He came out here and said this in front of an audience. Quick interjection, this won't take long. If you like what I do, I'd appreciate it if you watch the video to the end. YouTube bases video reach off of watch time, so watching even an extra minute makes the video go further. Liking and subscribing goes a long way too. Finally, it would be awesome if you guys checked out my Patreon. All links are in the description, of course. Okay, back to the video.
And everything to play in some of the ladies' leagues. But in any case, it turned into this. So explain.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that you have to understand is that I was getting ready to leave the country to go make our Pendragon series on July 9th. And somewhere about mid-March, I thought, wouldn't it be great if between today and July 9th, we wrote and produced an entire feature film? And so...
Between March and July, they wrote and produced a feature film in 4 months? Okay.
Yeah, the Crane Boys mentioned the idea that you had given them, and it had been in the back of my mind that, we really should be making the movies that only we can make. In fact, I think it's a line that you had come up with. What are the things that only we can do? And so I thought, well, obviously, there has not been a true comedy made since Barack Obama became president.
There hasn't been a comedy made since Obama? What? Obama killed comedy, boys. Pack it up. No more comedy. It's not allowed.
I mean, Barack Obama destroyed 3 things: rock and roll, comedy, and America.
What? How did Obama destroy any of those things? This is insane. These people are in an alternate reality. This is absolutely, I can't even believe that they're saying this. All the way back when Obama was the president, there's a little culture war issue that Republicans decided to lean into. It was the war on Christmas. I don't know if you guys were paying attention to politics at the time. I wasn't. I feel like I remember hearing something about, oh, people aren't allowed to say Merry Christmas anymore. But every time I walked through the stores, people were saying Merry Christmas. So it's like, what are they even talking about? On the left is a QAnoner named Delora O'Brien, extremist nutcase, Putin lover, self-proclaimed. I'm not just saying this. Like, these are things that she identifies as. Well, the Putin lover thing is, anyway. And on the right is Rachel Hamm. She ran for Secretary of State for California. She lost, but she's also a QAnoner nutcase and an evangelical and all that.
Do you remember when Obama was president? And for those 8 years, we were having a hard time saying Merry Christmas?
Ugh, yeah.
No, you don't, because that never happened.
How things have changed.
No, they haven't. They're exactly the same as they've ever been. It's the same with these guys right here. Obama didn't stop Christmas. He didn't wage a war on the term Merry Christmas. He didn't end rock and roll. He didn't hurt America or whatever the hell that meant. He didn't, what was the other? He didn't kill comedy. Stop blaming Obama for your problems. That is insane. Get a grip on reality, people.
3 things: rock and roll, comedy, and America. Other than that, he was a perfectly average president, but
he didn't kill any of those things. These people need help for real. They live in another reality.
It became impossible to tell a joke during the Obama administration.
How? How was it impossible to tell a joke? I don't understand. Anyways, Matt Walsh decided to go on Piers Morgan to talk about the film Lady Ballers. The film that was completely irrelevant because, as it turns out, none of these things are problems. I think that sports teams, or not teams, but like sports leagues, in my opinion, should be able to decide based off of evidence and everything else whether or not trans people are allowed in to compete with whatever, with cis people. And almost universally, and I don't know of any case that this doesn't apply to. I'm going to say universally, as far as I know, all of the sports leagues have decided that trans people can play with the cis people because their hormone levels and their everything else bring them down to an exact equal comparative level. They are effectively, they are women. Trans women are women. And every sports league that I know of has affirmed that and agreed with that. And, this movie was created to call out the idea that sports leagues are like just allowing anybody in. It's not happening. It's a completely irrelevant movie. I couldn't possibly care less about sports. And I don't even know anything about sports, truthfully. So I'm just going to lean on whatever the experts say. And the experts are saying, trans women are women and they can compete with women and it's 100% fair. So I'm down. Let's do it. Listen to Matt Walsh here. Just make things up to support his already existing biases and fears.
Lady Ballers is the brilliant new movie from
Brilliant. Okay.
you guys at Daily Wire. Let's take a look at a little clip.
Oh yeah, this is the trailer we watched a minute ago. You get the idea. So let's just jump to their commentary on it.
I mean, it's a brilliant idea.
Wow, that was a forced laugh.
First of all, why did you make it?
The reason why the movie exists is pretty simple. Number one, it's a really funny idea, and it's also it's the kind of movie that needs to exist. Like this.
Really, it needs to exist because there are so many trans athletes out there stealing titles from people, right? Totally. With absolutely no hormones, and they're just identifying. Suddenly they're like, oh, I want to win in a women's league, so I'm going to pretend to be a woman and just walk in here with absolutely no preparation, with no work with a therapist, no hormone treatments, no nothing. Just going to walk in here and do it, right? Totally.
This whole concept of men competing against women in women's sports is absurd. It's ridiculous. It's laughable. And, if this kind of thing was happening 25 years ago, there would probably be a comedy like this made about it. But these days,
Yes.
They don't really make comedies anymore at all, but they certainly aren't going to make a comedy.
They don't make comedies anymore? Again, what are they talking about? Barbie was a comedy, and I thought that was hilarious. What are you talking about? There are no comedies since Obama. What?
certainly aren't going to make a comedy making fun of this. So we did.
And the truth is that it really takes the whole argument on the pro-trans athlete side to its logical conclusion.
Okay, this is interesting. What he's saying here, logical conclusion. Keep that phrase in mind, okay? The trans argument to its logical conclusion. Keep that in the back of your head.
Pro-trans athlete side to its logical conclusion. I've always, when I've interviewed politicians who don't want to speak common sense about this, I say, well, okay, so if you have limitless self-identity and anyone can say, I'm now female, what happens if Usain Bolt or Floyd Mayweather decide they want to be a woman? Would you be happier than competing against biological females in women's sport? And they always have to say yes.
Who is they, Piers? Who are you talking about? Who is this fictional individual or group or entity or whatever who thinks that Floyd Mayweather should be able to compete against, I don't know, the women's league or whatever? If you noticed, he used an interesting term there, logical conclusion. In law, there's something called a bright line rule. Nearly everything in society is on a spectrum, right? Like, how drunk are you? How drunk is too drunk to drive in a car? Usually the limit, I think, is 0.08. Is that right? 0.08% blood alcohol content? Is that federal? Is that state? I don't know. That's the bright line that's been drawn. That's the line in the sand. You're not more drunk at 0.081 than you are at 0.079. They're effectively the same, but there's a line there that we draw because it's a spectrum. You're not going to be a better driver at 15 years old and 11 months, or a worse driver at that age, than you are at 16 years and 1 month. But there's a bright line at 16 years old. You can't get your license before that point in some states. What's the bright line for gay marriage? 2 consenting adults. Bright line. That is who is allowed to get married. That's who's allowed to do whatever. Do anything. So following things through to their logical conclusion, the way that Piers is suggesting here, is not how anything works. That's not how law works. That's not how philosophy works. That's not how any of this has ever worked. Why are you talking about taking it to its logical conclusion? Yeah, why do we let men and women get married? Before you know it, they're going to be marrying animals. They're going to be having like 16 wives if a man and a woman can get married. Unacceptable. There's a bright line there. If you can drink alcohol while you're driving, even a little bit, even 1 beer, just think about the logical conclusion to that. People are going to drink 20 beers before getting in their car and driving, if they're allowed to do that. Not so long ago, there were people complaining about drunk driving, too. It was not always illegal to drive drunk in the United States.
Still, any attempt to restrict drinking and driving here is viewed by some as downright undemocratic.
It's kind of getting common is when a fella can't put in a hard day's work, put in 11, 12 hours a day, and then get in your truck and at least drink 1 or 2 beers.
This is funny in retrospect, right?
We're making it laws where you can't drink when you want to. You have to wear a seatbelt when you're driving.
The gall.
Pretty soon we're going to be a communist country.
Things have not changed, have they, in all these years? Anyways, the point is, there's a bright line there. The bright line for drinking and driving is 0.08. The bright line for, I don't know, what was it he was even complaining about in the first place?
Floyd Mayweather decide they want to be a woman.
Right. Who can decide who wants to play in which leagues or whatever? Well, the leagues have decided that. The leagues have decided trans women can compete with cis women as long as their, I don't know, like estrogen and testosterone levels are roughly equivalent or something to that effect. I don't know what rule they have, but it allows for trans people to compete with cis people. I'm perfectly fine with that. The leagues have decided that it's fair, and I don't see why anybody cares otherwise. If Floyd Mayweather wanted to compete in the women's league, Floyd Mayweather would have to start taking hormones to bring his hormone level down to that of a woman roughly his size and age and whatever else. At that point, I'd be okay with Floyd Mayweather competing against women. Honestly, why do we even have people categorized into men and women in sports? Maybe there's a reason. Maybe I'm just not like aware of it. I've been paying attention. I don't know. Maybe there are some inherent advantages to men. I have no clue. It seems to me, though, a better option or a better strategy would be to combine men and women and separate it by like weight or something like that instead. I don't know. I know nothing about it. I'm just throwing out ideas. This guy is just throwing out logical fallacies. It's called the slippery slope fallacy, by the way.
What happens if Usain Bolt or Floyd Mayweather decide they want to be a woman? Would you be happier than competing against biological females in women's sport? And
totally, absolutely. As long as they took the hormones to bring themselves down to a level that was roughly equivalent. Yeah, absolutely. But he's trying to get people, and he's implying at the very least that people say yes, unqualified, just across the board. Yes, Mayweather wants to compete against women. Yes, he can. That's not what anybody has ever said, to my knowledge.
Women's sport. And they always have to say yes. And it's always completely preposterous. Floyd Mayweather would kill women.
At his current hormone level, yes.
In a ring. And Usain Bolt would win the 100 meters women's Olympic final by about 99 meters. I mean, it's...
I don't even know if that's true or why. I don't know. Why is running separated into gender? I have no clue. But whatever.
An absurdity, which this film brilliantly lampoons, but is actually true.
No, it's not. And the owner of the Daily Wire admits it. He admits it's BS.
Yes.
I originally went to them and I said, you guys should go try out for a bunch of ladies' leagues. And that became not possible because, as it turns out, most ladies' leagues don't allow in actual men.
You don't say. This whole thing is fabricated. Do these people know the Bright Line Rule? I get the impression that, well, I wonder, does Matt Walsh know the Bright Line Rule? And then I got to thinking, this guy didn't even know how many trans-affirming surgeries there were for minors or people under 18, whatever. He had no idea when asked. He was asked... Wait, it was on Joe Rogan, right? I don't want to play the Joe Rogan clip because Joe Rogan goes after people for copyright and stuff all the time, but... Joe Rogan invited conservative pundit Matt Walsh onto his podcast to chat about gender issues, but the latter got schooled live on air after making the claim that millions of children are on hormone blockers. Millions of children. Walsh is a Daily Wire host who recently released a documentary, What is a Woman? Attempts to poke holes in arguments surrounding transgender and gender issues. In his appearance on Joe Rogan on Monday, which is, when was this? This is November 8th, 2022. Some of Walsh's comments got debunked by one of the podcast's producers. How many people have had this done? Rogan asked at one point in the podcast, referencing the blockers. Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but if we're talking about the drugs, millions, Walsh answered. Millions of kids have been on hormone blockers. Really, he said. I'm sure someone's going to fact check me on it, but my guess is that we're into the millions now at this point. Shortly after, the podcast producer displayed a Reuters story on a projection screen showing that although it could be an undercount, 4,780 children with a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis have been put on the blockers over the past 5 years. 5 years. It's things like this that make me wonder, does he know he's full of it? Is he aware of how stupid the things that he's saying are? Or is he a true believer? I'm starting to think he might just be a true believer. Just completely gone. Like his mind is gone from all the propaganda. The victim of propaganda has now become the perpetrator.
Absurdity, which this film brilliantly lampoons, but is actually true.
It's not true.
It is true, which is why you don't
It's not.
have to work that hard to make fun of it, and you don't even have to exaggerate that much. This is one of the things that actually, maybe it makes satire difficult these days, is that the reality itself is so ridiculous.
It's not. Ben Shapiro knows that. Does he not know that?
But it's usually in satire, you're taking something, you're taking the logic to an extreme extent to show how ridiculous it is. But in this case, all you're doing is this is what's actually happening.
It's not happening. It's not actually happening. You know what's happening in this case? In this case, they believe that reality is completely different than it actually is. So they try to satirize something that's already satirical and ridiculous. How do you create a satirical representation or a satirical perspective on something that's already absolutely out of this world absurd?
In real life. And I think that what you said there is key, though. You said that they have to. You were talking to someone who supports men and women's sports. They have to. They have to go along with it. They have to agree to whatever absurd scenario you throw at them. And they really do. They have to.
No, I don't. I don't have to agree to anything. If Floyd Mayweather wanted to compete in women's leagues, I would be fine with that. If he had the appropriate level of hormones. Why? I mean, that's not difficult. Why is that so hard for him to understand? Well, look, I'm not the only one saying this. This is something that people say all the time on the left. How is it that he's in this field dealing with these issues and never heard that? How is it that he made a whole documentary, What is a Woman, and had no idea how many people were actually affected by this? He thought it was millions. It's 4,780 over a 5-year period. I don't understand how this guy is so deep into a bubble when this is like his whole job to like operate outside of that bubble.
I think that the number of people who really deep down believe that it's fair and right for biological males to compete against females in sports, I mean, the number of people is vanishingly small. But on the left, they've basically boxed themselves into a corner, and so they have to.
Me? I've boxed myself into a corner? No, I haven't actually. My ideals and beliefs and principles are completely consistent across the board. This guy seems to think that reality is something completely different than it is because he apparently doesn't talk to anybody outside of his weird little bubble.
Defend this, and we should make them defend it.
Whilst simultaneously trying to pretend that they are pro-women's rights. I mean, that's the absurdity.
Oh, now we're going down the turf road where you have to be anti-trans if you're going to be a feminist. Absurd. Oh, because, Piers Morgan fancies himself a feminist, right? And so does Matt Walsh over here. These two guys, the bastions of feminism, right? They really care about women's rights. So they're going to stand up for women's rights against trans people all of a sudden for the first time in their lives. When it's convenient to use it to attack another group, they will pick up any banner.
Because, of course, it's women's rights to fairness and equality that are being dismantled at this altar of virtue signaling.
Careful, that's sounding like communist talk right there.
Nonsense.
And there are also the people that have claimed in the past to care so much about maintaining women's sports. I mean, that's what Title IX was supposed to be about. People often accuse me on the left. They'll say that.
I'm sorry, wait a minute. Did you say Title IX was designed to protect women's sports? I don't remember what Title IX is. Let me look. All right. I remember this. Title IX, the most commonly used name for the landmark federal civil rights law in the U.S., is enacted as part of the Education Amendments of 1972. Prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or any other education program that receives funding from the federal government. Is he complaining about an anti-discrimination law right now? It sounds like that's what he's doing. He's complaining about the fact that he can't discriminate against people.
About maintaining women's sports. I mean, that's what Title IX was supposed to be about.
I don't even know what he's talking about.
People often accuse me on the left. They'll say, well, you don't even care about women's sports that much. You're just...
No, he doesn't. He doesn't give a shit about any of this. You think this guy cares about anything? No. He cares about attacking a group. And whatever tactic he can use to get there, whatever he can use to convince people that this group is evil, he'll do it. Let me tell you why I care about this issue, this women's sports issue. The truth is I don't actually care. I have no investment in sports at all. I know nothing about it. I don't even know how to play football. I never watched it when I was young. Jehovah's Witnesses kind of had a stigma against it because it was created as a method of, military strategy and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I never got involved in sports. I couldn't possibly care less about this. But I do know that the far right has always used little wedges like this to get in the door. Let me give you one example. It's the same example I give every single time this comes up. I'm going to give it again. In the 1950s, segregation was still in full effect. There were some towns that were desegregating. Well, in the 50s, there's this town where a black family moved in because segregation had ended for the town, I guess. And the townspeople were outraged. You know why? Because the KKK, the right-wing group in the area, came in and started passing out little leaflets and stuff, little tracts, at the local elementary, middle, and high school to scare people as much as they possibly could. And what did they say to scare people? They didn't go with something absolutely reprehensible, like black people are inferior to white people and shouldn't live with them. No, they don't take that tactic because they know that independents, people in the center, and to the left of them generally, aren't going to like that. People to the left of hunting the homeless for sport don't care if black people want to live with white people, back then even. So what did they do to get people whipped into a blood frenzy? They went with something that they thought might be able to scare the shit out of everybody, including the left. They went to these schools, elementary, middle, high school, and told the kids if integration happened, if segregation came to an end, they would be forced to marry a black person as part of the integration process. You won't be able to marry a white person. You must marry a black person.
Some of the people are definitely against integration. And they have told my children that they have to marry. And my child doesn't even know what a is, but from the sound, it has scared them, and they have come home just crying, Mommy, do I have to marry Negroes? And my answer in handling all the fears that children come in is that you can marry whomever you wish.
Oh, except for another dude. Anyway, the point is, the strategy has always been, don't go with what you really want, because nobody else really wants that. Don't go with black people shouldn't be allowed to live among white people because they're less than white people. Don't go with that one. Go with something that everybody can agree with. Everybody. Nobody should be forced to marry somebody that they don't want to marry. Go with something that's roughly in the middle, even if it's not happening. Floyd Mayweather should not be allowed to compete in a women's league. Well, nobody wants Floyd Mayweather to compete in a women's league. What are you even talking about? That's not even allowed right now. Literally nobody wants that. But you know what saying that does? It opens the door for people to create outrage over the fact that this is happening, over the fact that this is being debated when it's not. It was never debated. They're trying to push it a little bit further over the line into something that's not representative of reality so that they can get everybody on their side, when ultimately what they want, when I say they, I mean Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire. I'm talking about the Daily Wire. What they want, as evidenced by their documentary, What is a Woman, is to destroy trans people. It is to ban being trans at all. They call it a mental illness. Let me show you somebody at the Daily Wire, Michael Knowles. This is Michael Knowles' CPAC speech from 2023. Yeah, March 4th, 2023.
If men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people.
It doesn't. This is what I'm talking about. You are infringing on my rights by trying to be trans. I have a right to not have to see. No, you don't. We live in a society. We all live together. You have to deal with the fact that everybody has their own lives and their own ideals and morals and opinions and whatever, and you don't have a right to trample on mine. But no, he's going to go with the old tactic, the same one the KKK used. You are hurting me by being equal to me. When all you know is privilege, equality feels like oppression.
Taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at
That's genocidal language.
Every level.
I don't know how else to take that. So you wanted to know what they want, what the Daily Wire wants, what their end goal is, their intent? Eradicate transgenderism from society. Anyway, these people deeply, deeply need help. It's bizarre to see somebody use the exact same tactics as the KKK and not be 100% sure if they know they're propagandizing or not. Like, is Matt Walsh aware I don't know for sure. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Is Matt Walsh aware that he's just straight up wrong about everything? Tell me what you think.